What's going on YouTube? Watsim here again with another Forza tuning video. First one for a couple of weeks, do apologise about that. But today I have something very different, something that I haven't really done before. A combination of parts and a car that I wouldn't have even thought about trying to tune in a way that can make it competitive had it not been for some inspiration that I found online, having seen someone else use it, having spoken to them and telling me how they did it, and yeah, I just thought I'd give it a go. Now, admittedly, it's not amazing, it's not perfect, it is still a work in progress, but I think at this point it is worth showing it off, letting people who don't know about this way of tuning know about it and learn something, because I did. So with all that being said, let's have a look and see what I did to this lovely Volkswagen Golf. Okay, so upgrades. We're going to go straight to the engine, and as you can see we've got the 1.6 turbo rally engine in it. Very, very different. I have never previously properly used this engine before. I have used it on Forza 5 and I used it a couple of times, I think probably on this game as well, but I've never found a way of using it correctly before until now. So all I can say is it's very low top speed, extremely high torque, as you can see by the graph there, and extremely high acceleration. With this engine you need to be shifting at 5,000 revs. If you go above that, you're going to lose all the torque and all the power on the acceleration. It's like a diesel engine, really, if you think about it in that way. It's got everything in one lump. Put your foot down, you get it all, and then it's out of puff really quickly. Like it's over so quickly. You short shift on this thing like you wouldn't believe. It's literally 1, 2, 3, 4. It's so quick. But once you get used to it, and once you get that down, you will notice that even without the lack of top speed, this thing, because of its incredible acceleration, will you'll just blitz away from people at the start of a race. And that'll be that. Provided you get away from them, you're fine, and they won't catch you. And even after a slow corner, say after like a second or a third gear corner, as soon as you put your foot down, you will beat them down that straight. You will overtake them 9 times out of 10, because it's almightily powerful, and it is 4-wheel drive standard, obviously. We have got full aero on it, front and rear, which doesn't look the best. Looks like a bit of a shopping cart or a shopping trolley, but it's needed. You really need it. Wheels, or tyres first. We have got sport tyre compound. Widest they can possibly be at the front, and same at the rear. So 255s both front and rear. We have got the heaviest wheels possible, and they have been made as wide as possible, as large as possible. Again, that's purely for PR reasons. If I move this, it goes to 701. That's how much on the line this thing is. Gearbox, we have the street transmission, so we haven't got a customized gearbox. We've just gone straight up from the stock transmission to that. It basically gives you a much more even ratio, and it actually improves the PI. You gain 9 PI from it, even though it's better. I don't know, it's weird, but yeah, that's where you got to go with it. There's no real point in tuning this gearbox, in my opinion, because whatever you do, you're shifting at 5,000 revs. Sure, you can space that out so you get more power out of it, but it's not really necessary with this, and the cost of PI is 17. It's just not realistic. We have no driveline, so it's just stock driveline on that, and we have a race diff. Now, handling wise, we've got obviously race brakes, race suspension, race front anti-roll bar, race rear anti-roll bar, a full roll cage, and all the weight has been taken out. Now, engine wise, it's very easy. It's got a restrictor on it. You just take it all off, put the maximum one on. There you go. That's that done, really. Just gives you the most power, the most possible torque. I mean, look at that. You've got 589 foot-pounds of torque, 497 brake horsepower. This thing is just, it's all about that acceleration. 171 top end, you won't get there realistically. You'll probably get sometimes on a really long straight to about 160, but it will get to 150 pretty quick, and after that it struggles. But that's enough, trust me, that is enough. So with that, let's have a look at the numbers. So tyre pressure is set to 27.5. This is because it just works. It's sport tyre compound, so 27.5 or 28 is fine. Perhaps you could maybe higher it to 28. I find that this works for me. And if you're going to use this as a rain car, a car for, you know, wet tracks, then maybe hiring it would be a much better idea, because you really do feel the loss of grip down to the lack of temperature in the tyres, obviously the lack of grip on the road. So if you're going to use that, I know a lot of people do like four-wheel drive cars for rain events. If you're going to do that, I would suggest perhaps hiring it slightly, maybe 28.5 or just 28. I'm not sure, I haven't tested it, but whatever reaches 32 psi when the tyres are warm. So there we go. Gearbox, standard, can't do anything to it. It is what it is. It's a very even gear ratio, as you can see. It's just what it is. It's fine. It works. Okay, so wheel alignment. Starting with the camber, we've got minus 2.4 on both front and rear. I have slightly changed the way I'm doing my camber now. On 99% of the cars I tune, I am trying to add more camber and reduce the amount of toe, because I think it just makes for a better, more responsive tune. This is obviously a slight exception, as you can see there, but getting back to the camber, the minus 2.4, I think it's a good balance. I think in general for most cars, what I've learned is 2.4 is probably just about the maximum. In certain cases 2.5, minus 2.5 is good, but I think once you go above that, in my opinion, the car loses all feel and you get a lot of understeer. I hate the feel of it. I like the pad to vibrate. I use a control pad. I like it to vibrate. I like to get some responsiveness. And when I turn, I like to feel like I know exactly what the wheels are doing. Now maybe that is because I do play the game in first person view, in cockpit mode, and you don't really get that same sensation when you play it in third person. I realise that, but for me personally, that's where I like it maximum, is at minus 2.4. Usually I wouldn't have them both the same, I don't think. I wouldn't have them both minus 2.4, but this being four-wheel drive, it being quite a stiff chassis, actually, I think it needed it. The rear needed to be, you know, as loose as the front. Okay, so with toe, we've got 0.1 on both front and rear. That's both positive toe, both toe out for the pair of them. Now, toe out on the rear is not something I would ever do on a rear-wheel drive car. You will oversteer, you will crash, and it will not be at all fun. It will be extremely unpredictable in most cases. Maybe you might get away with that 0.1. You might get away with that, but anything above that, it's going to feel crazy. I mean, it wouldn't feel good, in my opinion, like that. It would just feel strange. But as I previously said, with this being such a stiff, short wheelbase chassis, and it being four-wheel drive as well, it's really tough, I found, to get the turning correct on it. It felt really stiff and really uncooperative. And I actually did tune this car, sorry, a little while ago, probably about a month ago, maybe, for the first time. And the reason why I couldn't upload it, and I couldn't really erase it too much, is because of this reason. I couldn't use it on a consistent basis. So I couldn't knowingly upload it and say, hey, use this, it's great. It wasn't. It was okay, because I knew how to drive it. I knew that I had to wrestle it through certain corners, and I could make it work sometimes around certain tracks. What sorting this section in particular out has done has made it more easily accessible to people, just to literally just download the tune and drive it. which is of course what you want. You want a drivable tune. Whereas before it was like you needed to know exactly how to shove it into the corner to get the best out of it. And there probably is still a little bit of that now. Like, I don't think I personally get the best out of this car because it doesn't really suit my driving style yet. I need to learn how to use it better. I need to gain that experience from it, and you'll probably find the same. But as something to just jump in straight away and drive, it is much, much easier now. It's got much more of a plug and play aspect to it, if you like. So yeah, with this extra bit of tow, it gave it that extra accessibility. But as I say, for rear-wheel drive cars in particular, I would not recommend putting any tow out on the rear, ever. Now we've got the caster set to 6.7. Now I previously said in, I believe it was my last video for the Lotus Evora, which had a rear-weighted bias on it, had 55% of rate to the rear. I'll try and say that again without sounding like Jonathan Ross. It had 55% of the weight to the rear, which obviously leaves it being slightly, weighted towards the rear, which means you're going to get kind of a pendulum effect going around the corners, with the rear being much more dominant in the way the car steers. So I previously said, because of that you should perhaps have the caster higher, like around here somewhere. As it turns out, that is complete rubbish. What I said is 50% correct, because in all aspects of pretty much any car that has quite an extreme weight bias, so I'd say extreme being 5% either way. So if it's 55% to the front, I would say it's quite extreme. 55% to the rear, that's quite extreme as well. Maybe 54 as well, maybe. But in those cases, I think having the caster further back to about 6.7, 6.7 is probably the highest I've ever put on a car. I would say maybe 6.4, 6.5, probably 6.4 more often. Having it around there gives you a much better sensation, a much better feeling that the car is grounded, that the rear will not let go around a corner. If you can literally just plant the accelerator, not ridiculously, not so crudely that you're definitely going to spin out, but you can definitely give it more revs on the exit of a corner just by putting the caster back. It changes the weight of the car. It puts more weight on that rear, forgetting about whatever the weight bias is in some aspects of it. I think in cases where the weight bias is more even, so 51%, 52%, even 50-50, having it around 6.2, fine. That's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. I'm at 6.1, 6.2. Not 6.1 so much anymore. 6.2, maybe sometimes 6.3. But I'm usually working around this sort of area. So as I say, extreme cases, 6.7. This is really extreme. This is a 57% weight bias on this, I think, or 56%, one of the two. So this is really extreme. But in most cases, yeah, 6.4, 6.3, 6.2, around there. That's where I'd kind of work. Okay, so moving on to anti-roll bars. I've got this set to 24.62 on the front and 22.31 on the rear. Now again, I came out with this because it felt like the best balance. I don't actually have a reason for why it's set this way. I can say that the way I am starting my anti-roll bars now stock is based on the weight bias of the car, or the weight percentage of the car. And I can say that pretty much stock in most cases, in cars that weigh more than 2,500 pounds, I start my rear anti-roll bar above 22, just above 22, around that sort of range, just because I think it gives me the best stability. And the front, with this being 56-57%, I would have started it around 56, 57, because I find that in some cases, particularly with rear-wheel drive cars, that kind of stock setup works for a lot of them. So say you have a car, you have an American muscle car that's 54, 55% weight bias to the front. I would say starting anti-roll bar 22 at the rear, say 26.5 at the front. It's going to give you a pretty stable, decent stock starting point for where you should start your anti-roll bars. I mean, some little adjustments from there, sure, make them softer, probably on the front and maybe a little bit on the rear from that point, maybe. But I find that works quite well for me. This little routine I have, this little mechanism I have for it. So yeah, with this I started probably around the same sort of thing, and I've got it down to 24.6 now. There we go. Okay, so springs, we've got set to 808.3 and 635.1. Again, this is using the same old equation that I use for every tune. It's the weight of the car times 0 point whatever the front weight percentage is. Divide that by 2, and that will give you the number for your front spring ratio. It'll be a number for this one around 808.3. And for the rear, you take the weight times by 0 point whatever the remaining weight percentage is. So in this case, it'd be, I think, about 44% if it's 56 at the front. So it'd be 0.44. Divide that by 2, and that will give you a number around 635.1. Around that. And ride height, I've got set to 1 above the minimum. Provides the most stable, evenly balanced setup I think possible. Have it low as possible. I think that you risk bottoming out all the time. I mean, you kind of do with this, to be honest. If I hit a curb with this setup, it tends to send the car a little bit skew with, but you know, that's the choice I've made. I have to drive more carefully. Perhaps you could raise it slightly to that. You might find that that's more lenient, but at the same time that will marginally change the way the car handles. Just from doing that, it will change the way that the body, the car's chassis responds to corners and such. So the way the car's currently set up, that's ideal. Rebound stiffness, I've got set to 7.3 and 7.1, and bump 5.6 and 4.1. Now, I have a new way of setting my rebounds, and it makes it much more user accessible for people who want to just tune their cars in the same way over and over and over again. I now start out with every car that I tune with the same stock setup on all of these. I start out with it. I don't end with it, but I start out with it. So rebound on the front starts at 7.3 on every tune I have. So that's 7, that hasn't moved. On the rear, every car I tune, I will start it at 6.8. Bump stiffness, I will start at 5.6 on the front, so that hasn't changed. And I will start the rear at 3.9. Now the reason that I started at this is purely because the best tune I've made has been my Pontiac Trans Am 77. It's easily the best tune I've got. That tune setup is that. What you see there, it is that. So I've just taken the best tune setup I've ever had and just literally mirrored it for every other setup. And now, to be honest, you could set that to every car and it'll work fine. It will work okay. But it's not perfect for every car. It doesn't work for every car. The weight of a car comes into consideration, a chassis type, everything. The weight bias, everything makes the car need little things. It makes one car need little things that the previous car didn't, which is why you tune. If every car was the same, you wouldn't bother tuning. They would all be the same and it would be fine. So what I'm saying is, if you just like a stock setup, I'm saying 7.3, 6.8, 5.6 and 3.9 will start you off in a very standard, decent way every time. That's in most cases. I've had a couple of cases where the car has been pretty much undrivable, but they are very rare. They've been with like ridiculous cars. I think I tried one with the Heisenberg car that I recently bought, the Aztec. I tried it with that, and it was okay, but with that chassis and that car being what it is, it's not going to work. So with cars like that, it's not it's not going to be great. I'm not going to guarantee that, but I'm going to say in 90% of cases, if you want to tune a car and you don't know how to set your rebound, you don't know how to set your bump, you don't know what any of it's about, start it like that. Excuse me. Start it like that, and yeah, it will be fine. It will work fine. It won't be great because you've still got to tweak it a bit for certain cars, but in a lot of cases that will work fine. That's your Watson guarantee, apparently. So yeah, this is at 7.1 and this is at 4.1. Again, I've just slightly tweaked that because the rear wasn't responsive enough. As simple as that. The front was fine. I don't mind the way the front handles on this, so I've just left that. But the rear dragged. It wasn't responsive enough. So just making it a little bit more stiffer in both bump and rebound just gives it that extra bit of responsiveness. Now you can shift this higher and it will give you a little bit more responsiveness. But I just felt where that was fine for me. Aero got set to 80 and 150. Don't really have a reason for this. It's just, play around with it, find what's the best possible thing. I mean, a lot of people, I've said this before, but I've had debates, shall we say, I was going to say arguments, but I've had debates with people on my stream who try to tell me how to tune sometimes, and they've told me that you must always have maximum aero. I don't agree with that. I think that's, I've said before, I think it's a very lazy, almost newbie way of tuning. To me, it's what I did when I first bought Forza. I thought, okay, put most aero because it makes sense. You get the most downforce and you get the car planted, which you do. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the quickest tune. It doesn't mean it's going to be the best tune. It just means that the car is going to be planted and it's going to handle okay. It doesn't mean it's going to be quick. So, yeah, all the aero on my cars is quite different. I think 80 and 150 is something that I've kind of grown used to, but there are a lot of cases where it's higher than that and there's a lot of cases where it's lower than that. So yeah, I think this is a very variable thing. Some people like it high, some people don't. Fair enough, whatever. I like it there. Brake balance, we've got set to 50% and 85%. Now 50% because it's four-wheel drive car and you need all the wheels doing work, in my opinion. All the wheels are accelerating and turning. They also need to be braking. They also need to be doing the same amount of work there. That's just my theory on it. Whether that's right or wrong, yeah, I don't know. And 85% because that's the pressure I like. I like anything around here. That's where I like it. It's what I'm used to. A lot of people, again, people who've used my tunes, friends who've used my tunes say, oh, I can't get used to your brakes. They're too crap, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. Change them to the way you like them. Absolutely fine. But I'm just saying, that's the way I like them. I think it enables me to brake later into a corner. I've got more manoeuvrability when I'm braking. I can sometimes even brake and turn, which, you shouldn't really do. But with this setup, I kind of can. So I think it's quicker for me. Diffs. I've changed the way I do with diffs. They are nowhere near as high as they used to be, as you can see. I found that I had a bit of an understeer issue in certain cases, and also a bit of an oversteer issue in certain cases. Like with the deceleration, sometimes when shifting down on certain cars, I'd find that the car was losing a bit of rear end grip, and it wasn't really handy for me. So now I'm mainly around the 50% mark. So as you can see, we've got 51%, 54%, 52, and 55. Now, I don't think it's on purpose that they are 1% more on the rear than they are on the front. I don't think there's a reason for that. I think that's just where I've just ended up. But again, these are very variable. You can change what you like. I don't think this needs much change in my opinion. And the balance is 50% because with the four-wheel drive cars, I think that 50% is the best. Actually, it gives you the best balance. It gives you the best balance of grip. It gives you the best balance of turning and speed. It just feels like a more game type experience, I suppose. You don't want that. Probably you wouldn't want that in a real life situation where if you had a car you would want every wheel doing the exact same thing. But for a game, which is what this is at the end of the day, it just feels more maneuverable, more playable, easier. That's why I do it. So to sum up with this car, I can say that it's pretty much usable around most tracks. It's not so good around really tight tracks with a lot of slow corners. It's not great around those tracks because its turning circle isn't the best. You're gonna have to shift down to the second gear a lot, and I would, in my opinion, avoid going below third gear as much as possible. Third gear gives you enough maneuverability through the corner, and it gives you the perfect amount of acceleration coming out of a corner, coming out of a slow corner. If you get out of second gear, because this is a short shift gearbox, because, you know, after 5,000 revs it's got nothing, you're going to lose a lot of time. You're going to lose a lot of speed. At the end of the day, you need to keep it in as high a gear as possible. So, on average, for whatever gear you would usually go around corners in another car, in like a standard, you know, rear wheel drive, whatever, or in a standard car that you would use, or with the standard engine, shall we say, with a V8 or a V6 or whatever the engine may be, I would say go an extra gear. So if you go around a corner in second, usually go around it in third. If you go around a corner in third, usually go around it in fourth. That's a very generalistic way of saying it. It isn't that cut and dry. It isn't that black and white. But you definitely want to be in a higher gear than you think you do around a lot of corners, because that's where you're going to pick up a lot of your time with this thing. That's where this thing excels, because its exit speed from a corner is everything. It's not necessarily because it's such a great handling car, because it's not. It's a decent handling car. It's not because it's got a great top speed. It's all about the acceleration. So for you to maximize that advantage, you need to be in the highest gear possible for a corner. Sebring is a great example of that for me. There's a lot of corners around there where sometimes you think you should be in maybe second or third gear, but for those corners you should be in third or fourth. I gained about, I think it was about 7/10 on one lap just by literally upping the gear I was in on certain corners. And it doesn't feel like much, and it feels a bit awkward sometimes braking for the corner because you don't have that same engine braking slowing you down. You've got to do a bit more work with the brake, but it pays off. It really does pay off. And having spoken about Sebring, I think Sebring is probably my favourite track to use this car around. It has the right balance of corners that have a flow to them, but also there are kind of slowish corners where you can really maximise that acceleration. I've used this car around Catalonia. It wasn't great around that. It doesn't quite have the manoeuvrability that you need for a track that has those kind of flowing corners, those flowing slow corners. It struggled, in my opinion, around that. It did an okay time. You can use it around there, don't get me wrong, but it's not wonderful. It's not the best. I also used it around Road America. Really good around there. Surprisingly good around there. Not the full, really quick one. It was the alternate one, the one with the chicane on the back straight. And yeah, I won the race by many seconds. It wasn't a great quality lobby. I freely admit that. But I think I did a high 23, I believe. I think I did like a 23.9, which is okay around there. It's not super quick. It's not, you know, it's not earth-shatteringly fast, but it's quick enough, and you're going to compete with a lot of people around there. And that you're going to compete with, you know, 95% of people around there with that kind of time. So with all that being said, give it a go. Remember, shift at 5,000 revs, and yeah, it might take a bit of getting used to, but I'm sure once you do get used to it, you will enjoy it. And as I say, it is a work in progress. I am going to keep tuning it, as I do with all of my tunes. So if you've been going by a lot of my videos and looking at what I've done to them and just sticking to them, I can pretty much guarantee that 99% of the videos that I've put on here now, I've probably changed those tunes and I've uploaded different ones. But that doesn't mean to say that those videos aren't still helpful. They aren't still, you know, decent. That's my learning process that I've gone through. That's what all this is for me as well. So with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please drop a like, please do subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.